In this video, I'll look at blocking in some key poses with the Anibot. In the design thinking videos, he and two others are animated in a scene. What I'm going to do here is work in a simpler scene and get an emotion test going. He'll bounce up and down and look around at the top of each bounce. What I'll start out with is a ground plane. I'll make it by holding Shift and right-clicking and choosing Polyplane. I'll spin around a bit, and I'm going to hold Shift to make a square ground plane. I'll make sure I hit W for move and press V for snap. I'll snap this ground plane to the bottom of the bot, so he starts out on the ground. I'll also give myself more frames, increasing the number of frames both visible and on the timeline to 240. Maya's default frame rate is 24 frames per second, so this gives us 10 seconds of footage. Now I'm ready to animate, and what I'm going to do is block in the poses, setting keys, and then looking at the strength of each pose with step tangents. What this will let me do is analyze each pose and look at arcs of motion over them before I'm seeing them tween together. I'll select his main control and make sure I'm at frame 1. I'll press Shift W to key his translation and Shift E to key the rotation. What I typically do is key the major elements with hotkeys, such as move and rotate. S keys move, rotate, and scale all at once, and I may not want move and rotate and scale keys overlapping every time. So I'll be particular about what I key, and I'm ready to key his other custom attributes here. What I'm going to say is that he starts out in a neutral pose, crouches down, and then springs up in that first jump. I'll go over to frame 24, giving him a second, and I'll look at the squash and stretch control. I'm going to select it and squish him down just a touch. Not too much, but just the tiniest bit, to say he's crouching down in anticipation. I'll right-click on that control and choose Keys Selected. Now I'm using Set Key Animation, which means I go to a frame and set a key. So I need to go back to frame 0 and make sure I add in a key where this value is zeroed out as well. I'll go back here to frame 1 and set this down to 0. Then I'll right-click on it and choose Key Selected. Now he starts to squish down, and I need to make sure at this frame he's moved down as well. I'll go into a front view using my hotbox, press 4 for a wireframe so I can see it, and make sure with the Move tool that he is moved down. I'll press Shift W to key this again, and now there's the first part of the animation in place. I'm going to put one bounce in and set the tangents to stepped and see how this looks. After this crouch, I'll let him hold for just a second. I'll come over to frame 30 and press Shift W to put another key in. Just because we're using keyframe animation on a computer doesn't mean we're going to see fewer keyframes than in a hand-drawn animation. We're going to see lots of keyframes to get the animation right, so don't be afraid to put them in. Now I'll go over a second plus, and I'll say at 57 or so, he has sprung up, and not only is he moved up, pressing Shift W to key it, but he's also scaled out the other direction. I'll pick my squash and stretch control and scale him out to elongate as part of that bounce. I'll right-click and key the selected attribute again. Now I'm ready to judge the poses. So far he's got a neutral, crouch, and bounce. What I'll do to test the strength of that animation is click on the timeline and hold Shift and drag. This selects all the keys in that range. I'll right-click on the keys and choose Tangents, Stepped. I'm going to show this in the graph editor, as I'm losing it in the bottom of my UI. Another way to do this is to choose Window, Animation Editors, Dope Sheet, or Graph Editor. It depends what we want to do. I'll go in the graph editor, and there's my keys. I'll pull this over so we can see, and there's all the things I've keyed. I'll frame all of them, and frame selected. I'll select all of my keys and change the tangent types to stepped. What we're looking for here is clarity in the poses first. Later we'll come back and push those keys around and add custom tangents in, really making sure he's got a snap in the timing. As I scrub back and forth, we can see he starts out neutral, crouches down, and springs up. And it's good posing. I've got a good anticipation, there's a little bit of a weight at the bottom, and he springs into action into that bounce. This is the blocking process, where we need to look at the key frames almost in isolation and see if they're timed out right, if they're occurring at the right place, and the motion over the time seems to be correct. In the next video, we'll look at animating his facial expressions to go with it, again keeping it in blocking or step tangents. Finally, we'll go in and start to smooth out these keys, seeing how they tween together and if the motion really holds up.